social media thing, stuff gets back to people back where I work before I get back, so I'm already in trouble. At any rate, in the district, some administrators went to a meeting, conference. I never like it when they go to a conference because then they come back with ideas, right? And they're not always winners, so to speak, right? Well, at any rate, they went to this meeting, and they learned at this meeting that student engagement was really important to student achievement. Now, I listened to that with a straight face. Of course, I wanted to say that is some groundbreaking work. Did you get that from the Journal of Duh, or where did that come from? All right, that's actually the highlight of the story. The next thing is, then they didn't call it this, I do, the engagement police. And what I mean by that, see, some of you are talking to each other because you got the engagement police in your district too. See, they went to the same meeting. That's what happened. They go around with their little clipboards and they keep track of, what students were engaged and how often and all this sort of stuff. And they did this district-wide kindergarten through high school. And it'll come as no surprise to anyone that the subject and the level that had the lowest level of engagement was high school math. So that's when they come back to me and say, we have a problem and you need to fix it. Right, yeah, fix it. So let me tell you how we fixed it. Well, we ran an experiment. I believe in collecting data. So we went into one of the high school math departments and we got those great big Post-it notes. Okay? Those huge Post-it notes. And on those huge Post-it notes, we wrote things like, why? And then on another one, how do you know? Do you agree? And we hung them in the back of the room. As a reminder to the teacher that every time a student gives you a response, you should follow it up with, why? How do you know? Can you explain? And better yet, don't follow it up with the student who gave you a response. Why not ask another student, do you agree with what Lauren said, right? And so that's all we did. We hung them up in some rooms and not in others. And then a couple months later, when they came back around to check data again, guess what? In the rooms where we had hung up the little Post-it notes, engagement was up significantly more than in the other rooms. And discipline problems were down. Now, this intervention costs about $3, right? I mean, this is it, right? And then a little bit of time you got to practice your writing to make it nice and neat and big. But that's it. So one thing you could go back and do on Monday is post those prompt reminders. Remind yourself to ask those questions and get that mathematical math talk going on in your classroom. All right. Effective teaching will not work unless you're surrounded by good practices and policies in the rest of the school and in your district, right? And that's where the 5 supporting principles come in, the essential elements of effective math programs. There are 5 of them: access and equity, curriculum, technology, assessment, and professionalism. As I mentioned at the beginning, I'm only going to hit 2 of them: access and equity and professionalism. So here we go. What does access and equity say? It says all kids ought to have access to high-quality instruction and high-quality instructional material on grade level math or above. Access to instruction and curriculum. All kids should have that access and the supports they need to do it. What is the obstacle? The obstacle is we don't give all kids access to either high-quality instruction or high-quality on-grade level curriculum. If we're honest with ourselves, you all know there are places that don't do this either, right? They set up different levels of mathematics. It's one of the unproductive beliefs. Tracking promotes student achievement. No, it doesn't. Let's look at this in more detail. The learning opportunities for kids put in a low, a medium, and a high math group or course are very, very different. If you are in a gifted and talented math class, whether it's first grade or it's high school, you are already engaged in the standards for mathematical practice, right? You're expected to critique the reasoning of others. You're expected to learn the mathematical structure. You're expected to reason and problem solve and write. You're expected to do all that. It's just what happens. If you're in the low math group, what are you expected to do? Come on, tell me. It's not a trick question. What do kids do in a low math group? Computation and worksheets. Right? That's what they do. They do not get access to conceptual ideas, problem solving. They do not get access to on-grade level math. The kids that are in the middle, they get some of that. But they don't get as much as the gifted and talented kids do. And all too often in the United States, we set up these three levels. And it starts right in the primary grade. High, medium, and low. This is a terrible thing. That's why I call it educide. Once you're put in a low or a slow math group, you don't get out. Once in a while a kid gets out, but that's why we call it a miracle, because it hardly ever happens. The research tells us once students are placed in a low or a slow math group, 80% of them are still there when they leave school. Notice I did not say when they graduate, because these are the kids we put at risk to drop out. They're not at risk. We put them at risk through our practices. You know this. If you're in a low math group in grade 1, where are you going to be in grade 2? Low, where are you going to be in grade 3? Low, where are you going to be in grade 4? Low, these are not trick questions. You just fall further and further behind. That's us, it's not them. And that's a really harsh reality we have to think about. Okay? Too often, schools who serve large numbers of struggling students slow down the pace of instruction so it goes at the student's speed. They teach less instead of teaching more. If you're behind in the race, you've got to do more to catch up, not less. You just get further behind. Kids need support to be successful in an on-grade level class. Don't get me wrong. That's part of access and equity, providing them the support to be successful in that on-grade level class. But we cannot water it down. We cannot slow it down. It may feel better at the time. They're not as frustrated. Their parents are happy. The grades look good. But every year they're just falling further and further behind. And that's why low or slow math groups should be against the law. You just can't do it. Now, on paper, at the high school end of things, we've detracked, right? I think about how when I started in my district, our high schools were grades 10 through 12. Now they're 9 through 12. And so I was brand new, first-year teacher. And I'd go into that, and so I'm going to teach 10th graders, of course, because all the upper-level classes are given to the old-timers, right? Now I am an old-timer, but at any rate, they're given to the old-timers. So here I am, a brand new teacher, 10th grade, and they assigned me 6 sections of pre-algebra. We don't even teach pre-algebra in high school anymore. Now our high schools are 9-12, right? So look at how things have changed. On paper, we've gotten rid of, in most places, everything below first-year algebra. Right? We detract in that sense. But notice what the research tells us. Even with universal algebra policies, sometimes we create different kinds of algebra. Okay? So while everything on paper says it's algebra or algebra 2, it's not really algebra or algebra 2. And I admit, in my district, once upon a time, we were guilty of this too. We had algebra for 9th grade kids, and then for the kids who struggled, we had 2-year algebra for 9th grade kids. We made the mortal sin of slowing down the pace of instruction. Now instead, you can give them a double period of algebra, give them twice the instructional time, so at the end of the year, they still learn the same amount as the kids who are in 1 period. Right? That's a way to provide that support to help them be successful and not put them behind. Now you may be saying to yourselves, we're in good shape. Everything we call algebra is really algebra. We have supports in place, double periods, double dose, whatever you call it. We maybe have a math interventionist in our school who works with kids who struggle. We're doing all the things we're doing. So now I ask a really, really, really hard question. But are the teachers tracked? Maybe the kids aren't tracked, but now we track the teachers. And what I mean by that is in most places, the teachers who are perceived to be the most effective or who've been around the longest are the ones who are teaching AP Calculus, AP Stat. If it's a really, really bad year, they've got 1 section of Algebra 2, and then they're complaining about it, right? Yeah, it's so hard. I got to teach these Algebra 2 kids, right? And the brand new teachers and the teachers who are perceived to not be quite as effective, they've got all of the double period algebra classes. So we give the kids who struggle the most, the teachers with the least experience or skills, to help those kids be successful. And that's the really, really hard question I want you to think about. If we're truly committed to equity, it won't be that way. Research tells us the assignment of less experienced teachers to lower achieving students is likely to exacerbate achievement gaps, not help us close them. All right. So I like to draw lots of parallels to medicine, and I'll draw another one here in the conclusion, which is coming up fairly quickly, and it's a Friday night. I know you all want to go to a pub, so I'm going to do my best to accommodate. In medicine, the most grievously ill patients see the most highly skilled physicians. Think about this. You have an illness. You go to your general practitioner. She says to you, you better go see so-and-so. I'm not up on this. You go see so-and-so. So-and-so can't help you. They go, you really need to go to that regional medical center. You need to go to the med school on this one. You keep working assuming you have insurance in our country, right? But assuming you have insurance in our country, you keep working your way up until you might see like the person in the whole country who knows the most about what's wrong with you. Right? And the same is true in education. The most highly skilled teachers have the skills to help the kids who struggle the most. My question or challenge to you is, in your building, in your department, in your district, are those most highly skilled teachers, at least part of their day, teaching the kids who struggle the most in mathematics, so that we give them the skills they need and the support they need so they can be successful? That's the challenging question. Professionalism. Well, in an excellent math program, the teachers collaborate and they constantly learn. So hats off to you. You're doing the constantly learn part, or you wouldn't be here right now. And I'm super impressed because you're giving up your Saturday and your Sunday and your Friday night to learn more. That is really impressive. And I mean that sincerely. So the teachers collaborate and they take collective responsibility for all student learning. What's the obstacle? In too many cases, we like to work in isolation. Right? I think about when I first went into Lincoln High School in room 213. I thought I'd die in that room, right? Well, I was completely on my own. The person in the room next to me, room 215, because we had some weird numbering system with odds on one side of the building and evens on the other. Must have been a language arts person that numbered the building, right? You can tell I'm still not over it. That's just not right. They're both going to go in order. At any rate, I had room 213. Person next to me in 215 teaching the very same thing. I don't think she and I exchanged 3 words all year long. And the danger in that isolation is that we develop inconsistencies. She could have been 20 times more effective than me, and I didn't know it. Was she sharing her planning? Were we talking about how we were going to teach these lessons? No. She was making her own tests. I was making my own tests. That should be against the law. Everybody needs to use common assessments, because if you're writing your own tests and somebody else writing their own tests, man, the expectations now are all over the place. Right? You have to collaborate on these things and work together to avoid those inconsistencies. We have a professional obligation, as Jim Ebert and Jim Stigler told us a couple decades ago on the teaching gap, to work together in professional learning communities to improve the art of teaching, our art and our craft. So, how many of you, raise your hands, if in your district you are working in professional learning communities, you have PLCs or data teams, you're told, yeah, lots of hands are going up. I'm not going to call on you, so be brave, raise your hand. Right? It's another one of those latest and greatest things. Everybody's doing PLCs. So once again, let me challenge you on how you're doing your PLCs. It's not what you do so much as it is how you do it that counts and makes a difference. PLCs should be about instruction. Most PLCs are not about instruction. They're our best cooperative groups, where we divide up the labor. We come together once a week in our professional learning community. And we say, you run off the quiz and you find the calculators, you reserve the lab, you make up the test, if you would get the quiz, everything will be great because I'll do nothing, right? We divide up the labor. Ready, break, we'll see where we're at next week. That's not a professional learning community. A professional learning community has got to be focused on instruction. Notice that in other cultures, teachers write these detailed, incredible lesson plans. They view the lesson as art. It's a performance. They'll come up with a lesson plan to teach one 50-minute period that is like 7, 8, 9, 10 pages long. They're planning the tasks, the questions they're going to ask, where kids are likely to get stuck, how they'll respond to that, at what points along the way where they'll work in those formative assessment processes. They thought this thing out endlessly, written it all down, huge lesson plan. See, in our country, we really don't plan much instruction. We actually pace instruction. We're pacers, not planners. Now, for those of you that are old like me, you recognize the thing on the right, the little image. How many of you have seen one of those in your day, right? It's something your district gave to you, and they called it your plan book. Yeah, down along the vertical scale is Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, so on and so forth, and across the horizontal you've got your periods. And that's your lesson plan book with little 2-by-2-inch squares. Nobody even intended for you to plan any instruction. All you could write down in that little box was 4.5, 1 to 999 even, right? I mean, that's all you could write down. There's it. There's a plan book, a pace book, a pace book. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're going, that's a great idea, but, we do not have time to collaborate and write 10-page lessons for 180 lessons a year for 5 different periods that we teach. I have 5 different preps. We don't have that time. And my response to you is, you're right, you do not have that time. But just because you don't have time to do that for every lesson does not give you an excuse to never do it for any lesson. So here's my challenge to you, another challenge, unless you've had several challenges. You need to go back to your building, your department, your team, and commit yourself, if you're not already doing it, to collaboratively planning one lesson, one per unit, or chapter, whatever you call it. A unit's usually, no less than 2 weeks and no more than 4. Let's call it 3. All right, it's a 3 to 4 week deal. When you take out all the interruptions for non-instructional things, I'm asking you to collaboratively plan in-depth one lesson a month. That's it. So you maybe do this 9 or 10 times a year. Which one do you pick in the upcoming month? You get together as a team of 3rd grade teachers and say, what is it kids really have a hard time with in this chapter? What is it they really struggle with? What's hard for us to teach? What do they not grasp? And then you go to work collaboratively to design that lesson or series of lessons, a little lesson arc, right? 2 or 3 lessons together to get the bigger mathematical idea that you will write together to help kids get that concept. And then you're going to reflect on it after you've taught it. And you're going to modify it on the spot. Because if you wait till next year, guess what? We just forget it all anyway. Now, if you do 10 this year and 10 next year and 10 the year after, pretty soon you've got this almost Japanese-looking notebook full of really high-quality, constantly revised and improved lessons. One a month. That's the challenge. Why? Because the research tells us when teachers co-plan lessons together, that's one of the things that has the highest likelihood of making a difference in what students learn. Kids who are in classrooms where the teachers collaborate learn more mathematics, and what we've traditionally called the achievement gap shrinks. If we're committed to equity, we'll work together to make sure all of our kids are being successful and we're responding to their needs. All right, so let's wrap this up. Sometimes, I don't know about you, but it all seems a little overwhelming. Every year there's so many things to do. I feel like, Sisyphus pushing the rock up the hill, right? It just seems to be never ending. And we seem to be, from some quarters, under attack, right, for what we're trying to do. I don't know if you've ever seen a parent meeting room packed like that. I've seen more than I ever care to see packed like that. Where the parents are all in there because they want to talk about the new math curriculum. Right? The new math. I was in just such a room a year ago in my own district, trying to explain some of the changes we were doing in our new elementary program, which, by the way, is resulting in the highest achievement scores we've ever had at the elementary level, right? Students are learning more. And parents were upset about it. They were not happy. They didn't like it. Well, I don't think they were upset that they were learning more, but they were upset with how they were learning it, right? Okay? And I went away from that meeting feeling beat up, and I asked myself, what the hell happened here, right? I got good news for everybody. This is a good thing. Why are people upset? And I really had to dig into the why. Because I was struggling with, why is this so controversial? We seem to go through it, we cycle through it over and over and over again. And so, when I dug into it, the answer of why it's so hard is right where we began. Teaching is a cultural activity. We teach the way we teach because that's the way we've always taught. When you went into your own classroom, you probably did exactly what I did. When I walked into room 213, which if I didn't tell you was next to 215 instead of 214, okay? I, in my head, said, I want to be Mr. Campbell. Why did I want to be Mr. Campbell? Because he was my favorite math teacher. And even in that own little way, I am recreating the culture. Right? Making things not change a lot. I was doing what he did. And cultures, by their very nature, exist in part to resist change, right? To keep the culture the way it is, so that we don't change all that much. But here's the problem. If we don't adapt, we go extinct. And I can use those words in California. Back in Nebraska, those are iffy sorts of terms, right? But out here, I feel like I'll be okay using words like adapt and evolve and extinct. But in the literature, there's this thing called a cultural trap. And what I mean by that is, it means we're doing some things today the way we've always done them. Those things might have worked 50 years ago for some kids, but today they work for a whole lot fewer kids. But we're still doing it. I will have teachers come to me and they say, Matt, you don't get it. The kids today are different. I go, well, say more about that. Well, you see, back in 1997 when I had this group of pre-cal kids, they were such awesome kids. They did their homework every day. They aced the test. Their parents were pleasant. They all went off and did X, Y, and Z. It was the greatest class group of kids I've ever had. And now my response to that is, it's great. I'm glad you had a good year. Okay? But here's the deal. The kids from 1997 are not coming back. Okay? We get who we get. It is our job to adapt to our students, not their job to adapt to us. Let me give you an example of a cultural trap in math teaching. Going over the homework at the start of the period. A lot of people go over the homework at the start of the period because, by God, that's what you do in a math class. You go over the homework at the start of the period. Okay? Now, I think that should also be against the law. See, I would like to make a lot of laws, right? I think that should be against the law, too. Because here's the deal. At the beginning of the period is when kids are most primed to learn. And we take the time when they're most primed to learn something and we give it up for review. And you all know somebody in your building who spends nearly the entire period doing what? Going over the homework. So they get in this homework trap. Kids got a lot of questions, they feel obligated to answer them all. So they got a 50-minute period, and they burn up 40 minutes going over the homework, so then they got 10 minutes to do new instruction. So there certainly is no engagement, no hands-on, no, I just got to tell you this, and then as the bell rings, I write down on the board the million problems you're supposed to do. Except you didn't really learn it because we rushed through the lesson, so the next day you've got an awful lot of questions. And I get in this cycle, and all I do is go over them. So Knock it off. Just stop it. I mean, so I suggested this one time, and a teacher, presidential awardee, said to me once, she goes, you know, I tried that not going over homework at the beginning of the period. Now here's what I think you ought to do. You need to pick up homework every day. You should look at 2 or 3 common problems, look at what kids appear to understand and not understand, and the next day make the warm-up problem be related to what you learned. Homework is formative assessment. It's daily formative assessment, right? She said, well, I tried that, and it doesn't work. And I said, well, okay, say a little bit more about how you tried it. She goes, well, I tried it last Friday, and it didn't work. All right, so here's the deal. Standard mathematical practice standard number 1, understand problems and persevere, isn't just for kids, it's also for adults. You can't just try something once. In fact, the research tells us you've got to try a new strategy 20, 30 times before you begin to own it. Well, now she went back and did that because she's a really highly effective teacher. And now she's like the biggest proponent of not going over homework at the start of the period. Yeah, you can go over it at the end after kids are working on their own stuff, but don't waste the precious start of the time. So here's our challenge. We live in the shadow of the stereotypes of math instruction from the 18th century. In 1788, Nicholas Pike published the first American mathematics textbook. It called it arithmetic. We're still dealing with that right now too, right? Okay. But in that book, he set out what the teaching process of the teaching script was for mathematics. It was state a rule, give an example, practice the rule. And how many people are still living that right now, 200 plus years later? Right? So, the cultural tradition of teaching math is awfully hard to overcome. It's this great big anchor of inertia. Most adults in America have experienced somewhere close to 2,000 hours of mathematics instruction. They've gone to school 180 days a year for 13 years and had math for an hour a day. And they've watched somebody do this. And so in their head, they know what it's supposed to look like. It's where they get their beliefs about what it's supposed to look like. But compare that to medicine. In medicine, we didn't grow up watching a physician at work 13 years in a row, an hour a day, right, for 180 days a year. So we trust the professional expertise, as somebody was mentioning, of our physician. And when we go into her and say, you know, I got this problem, and by the way, if you go in and say, I'm not feeling well, what's the first thing they really do to you at the doctor's office? They give you some form of a test. Yeah, diagnostic tests. And tests are not all bad. They can serve to diagnose issues. Every physician uses them all the time. So, you get diagnosed. And then she says, well, this is what you've got. The good news is we've got a really new, highly effective, research-informed treatment that is going to cure this. Now, if we handled that sentence the way we handle them in mathematics, what we would say to our doctor is, I'm super glad you think you've got this new highly effective treatment, but I want you to treat me with leeches because that's the way they did it 300 years ago. Right? No. Society should expect that you have expertise and that we know what good math teaching and learning looks like. And we have summarized what constitutes highly effective mathematics teaching and learning in principles to actions. Right? The 6 principles form the foundation of a highly effective math program. And remind the people you work with that math achievement in this country from 1990 to 2015, if you put a line of best fit in there, and I did this using Desmos, and that's not even a lie, okay? The trend line is clearly up. Kids know more math today than they did 2 decades ago. In fact, If you look at the National Assessment of Educational Progress long-term trend assessment, today's 4th and 8th graders are performing at a significantly higher level than their parents and their grandparents did. Kids today know more mathematics. People, as Daniel Patrick Moynihan once eloquently stated, everyone's entitled to their own opinion, but they're not entitled to their own facts. And so it may be your opinion that you don't like math instruction today, but the fact is it works. Kids know more, particularly in the elementary and the middle grade. But we still have a remaining challenge. At the beginning I said, if you disaggregate the data, all groups are moving up, but the learning differentials haven't closed. That's our great challenge. How do we transfer success to all students? That's the subtitle of the book, Ensuring Mathematical Success for All. You'll note I have tried very hard to never use the phrase achievement gap. I've talked about learning differentials. And the reason is that I think words are very important. Words are powerful. Words matter. As an example of how powerful words are, Frank Luntz, who's a political consultant, wrote a book, Words That Work. It's not what you say, it's what people hear. There's an actual cultural phenomenon that he's responsible for due to this work. And I got it up here. Pharmaceutical companies do not use the word treatment anymore. They use words like prevention and wellness. Now think about this. So I'll tell you a little story. That's how I kind of got onto this. I travel a lot. I'm always in a hotel room. First thing I do when I check into a hotel room is turn on the TV, right? Because I'm a guy, so I turn on the TV. But I always turn it on to the local news. Primarily because I want to know if anyone was murdered right at the hotel I'm staying at. This has actually happened to me. This is why I have this routine now. And do this the next time you watch the news, particularly if you're old and still watch network news. Pay attention to what all the commercials are for. If you watch a news program, what are all the commercials for? Somebody said it, hey, they're for drugs. Okay? Right? So I always think, what do people think who come to the United States from another country? Because I assume they're just like me and turn on the local news, right? And then they see all these drug commercials. And they think, boy, these Americans are one sick bunch of people, right? We have terrible headaches, allergies, back pain. Guys can't go to the bathroom because they got prostate trouble. No one can have sex on their own because they got all these ED drugs, right? I mean, I didn't even know there was such a thing as restless leg syndrome until I saw it on the commercial. And then I'm thinking, I think that's why I don't sleep at night. So I go to my doctor and say, I need a pill. See, all those ads, you can't go into the drugstore and buy that stuff. They're advertising wellness, they're advertising prevention, so you'll go in and ask for this stuff. But the point of the story is, look at that little subtle change from treatment to prevention. And now you've opened up your pill market from only the sick people to everybody. Because we all want to be well. Right? We all want to be well. And that relates to our use of the phrase achievement gap. When we say we have an achievement gap, what too many people hear is, it's a characteristic of the student. And if it's a characteristic of the student, then we're not responsible. So I say we can no longer use the phrase achievement gap. Instead, we should talk about the instructional gap, the identity gap, the agency gap. Much of what we label the achievement gap in our country is manufactured by us through our practices, policies, and procedures in schools. If you have a low math group, you're contributing to the achievement gap. Right? That's an instructional practice that's contributing to it. If you're not using visual representations to help kids make sense of algorithms, we're contributing to the achievement gap. If we're not collaborating in professional learning communities to make sure our practices are more consistent, we're contributing to the achievement gap. So what we really have is this instructional gap. We need to create classroom environments that give kids an experience so that students who have been historically marginalized begin to see themselves as doers of mathematics. as individuals who can not only do mathematics, but excel at mathematics. That's our challenge, so that we can ensure that all students are successful in mathematics. And so my final challenge to you is this. What actions are you going to take when you leave here Sunday? What actions will you take that you've learned here over the next 2 days that you'll implement in your classroom, in your school, in your district to make a difference and help all students achieve success? And how will you collaborate with your colleagues who aren't here? How will you go back and share what you've learned here to extend this conference experience to everyone that didn't have the opportunity you had to be here? That's what I wanted to share with you tonight. You are a great audience. You laughed every time you were supposed to, so I appreciate that. Let me do some commercials. All right. First of all, Totos. Mathematics for All is having the summer conference in Scottsdale, June 23rd to the 25th. There are classroom teacher scholarships available that are open until December the 14th, and registration is currently open. So that's advertisement number. See, nothing's free, so now you have to sit through my advertisements. There's the advertisement for Totos. As was mentioned, the annual NCTM meeting is just a little ways north of here in San Francisco. I want to encourage you all to come and drag 2 of your most reluctant colleagues with you to the annual meeting in San Francisco. You don't get those opportunities for it to be in your own backyard all that often. And my final advertisement is actually a gift, okay? If you are not a member of NCTM, I want to encourage you to become a member of NCTM. It's your professional organization.